Our next speaker is Nadia Rubaii, a three-time graduate of Binghamton University, bachelor's degree in 1985, Master of Arts in 1987, PhD 1991. She is a professor of public administration here at Binghamton and co-director of the Institute for Genocide and Mass Atrocity Prevention. An interesting and innovative and relatively new project here at the university started about 3 years ago, and this was funded in large part by donor support and enables us to do something that is tough to find at any university across the country and around the world. And so we're very pleased to hear about the work being done through the Institute. And Nadia's talk is titled, "Could You or I Prevent a Genocide? We Can, and We Must."
So what if I told you that you, or the person sitting next to you, or someone 3 rows or in front or behind you, could prevent a genocide? And that our actions could be as important, or perhaps even more so, than the United Nations or the US government. As Steve mentioned, I am not only a Binghamton University alum and professor of public administration, but also the co-director of an exciting and unique new initiative here at Binghamton University, the Institute for Genocide and Mass Atrocity Prevention. What I would like to do today is use the next 15 minutes to make the case for the potential power of individual atrocity prevention actors, what I consider to be a missing piece in the genocide prevention puzzle. And then I would like to ask you to be one of those individuals. So let's talk first a bit about the Institute. The threefold mission of the Institute for Genocide and Mass Atrocity Prevention is to bridge the gaps between the worlds of academia and practice, to break down the silos that keep disciplines and professions from working together, and to bring all of the teaching, research, convening, outreach, and service expertise of a modern university, specifically Binghamton University, to prevent genocides and other mass atrocities. My personal mission within that is to motivate and instill in every Binghamton Bearcat, student, faculty, administrator, staff, and you, the alumni and family, a commitment to do their part. Before I go any further, I need to clarify 3 things. First, for today's purposes, I am not distinguishing between genocides, crimes against humanity, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, or other mass atrocities. I use the word genocide in the title to get your attention, shamelessly, but I'm talking about all mass atrocities. Second, it is well established that genocides are processes that develop through some fairly predictable stages and that require the collaboration and participation, or at a minimum, the complicity and the absence of opposition from many, many individuals. Third, well before mass violence, there are early warning signs for those who are willing to see them, beginning with us versus them thinking and dehumanizing symbolism and treatment. In fact, there are multiple organizations that evaluate the risk of mass atrocity using various combinations of political, economic, and social indicators. The key consideration for our purposes today is not which countries are at the top of those lists, but rather that every country is on those lists. Every place is at some risk of genocide at this moment, no matter how small that risk may seem. So when most people think of genocide, they think of the Holocaust. It wasn't the world's first genocide, but it was supposed to be our last. In its wake, the international community declared never again. Never again, so they said, would the world sit by and watch while such horrors were allowed to occur. We had a name for this crime. It had punishments, and we had an international pledge to protect against it in the future. But as Samantha Power, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations in President Obama's administration, and now Harvard University professor, has aptly observed, never again has become the world's most unfulfilled promise. Instead, what we have seen is again and again. In Cambodia, Bangladesh, Darfur, Bosnia, Rwanda, Myanmar, and the list goes on. So is it presumptuous then to think that you or I can make a difference? I don't think so. And that takes us to the heart of my argument, that each and every one of us has a responsibility and an opportunity to help prevent a mass atrocity. To make that case, I need to address the four most common criticisms and objections that I encounter. First is the issue of individual versus institutional response. Some of you may be asking yourselves, well, isn't that the purview of the United Nations? Or isn't this the responsibility of powerful governments like the United States? Or aren't there already hundreds of civil society organizations doing work in this area? The answers to those three questions are yes, yes, and yes. And it isn't enough. These macro and meso-level actors are absolutely essential for genocide response, recovery, and rebuilding. But they have proven woefully inadequate at prevention. So we need to look at the micro level, at individuals. I'm not talking about individual perpetrators. I'm talking about the hundreds, thousands, millions of individual bystanders. People who choose to look the other way and not recognize the signs of impending or actual violence. Given the sheer number of bystanders required to allow a genocide to progress to its more advanced stages, the individual level is the critical point of disruption. Second is the issue of expertise. So you might accept that there could be a role for individuals. But this would be for people with particular disciplinary training or professional expertise, right? Maybe it's for those who study political science, but surely not for those who chose comparative literature. Maybe it's for those who practice law, but not for architects or engineers. Perhaps it's for social workers, doctors, journalists, accountants, and educators, but not for musicians, environmental scientists, restaurateurs, or video game designers. Well, I would argue that we need people from both the obvious and the less obvious fields to be committed to atrocity prevention. We also need people who have stayed out of the paid labor force to raise their families. We need young people. We need retirees from all fields. Atrocity prevention requires that we have all hands on deck. Third is the issue of time and place. There is a common but problematic phenomena in the world of genocide and mass atrocities, that we are better able to recognize them and be critical of them when they're long ago or far away. We can also begrudgingly acknowledge them when they're in full force, and the evidence of mass killing or mass displacement can no longer be refuted. But we're particularly bad at recognizing them when they're close to home or in their early stages. In fact, people who call attention to early warning signs are often accused of crying wolf. Recall that I mentioned that genocides are processes. These processes are not strictly linear, and they often occur over periods of many years. The changes are incremental, and they almost imperceptibly push the boundaries of what we accept as normal, until what is normal creeps towards dangerous. So like the proverbial frog in a pot of water being slowly brought to a boil, we don't recognize the signs until mass violence is well underway. Every place is at some risk of atrocity. No place, no group of people is immune. And so every place is in need of atrocity prevention actors. Fourth is the issue of activism. If you're sitting there thinking, yeah, but I'm just not one of those people who demonstrates and marches and attends rallies, no matter how important the cause. I get it, and that's okay. I'm not asking you to drop everything and take to the streets and protest. I am not asking you to quit your jobs, pack up your families, and move to another part of the world. And I'm not asking you to take your life savings and create a new organization or give to existing ones. We do need more activists, we need more humanitarian volunteers, and we need more philanthropic investors in prevention. And we also need you in your current life manifestation, with whatever job, living in whatever city, with whatever lifestyle you have chosen. We need people who will contribute to atrocity prevention in extraordinary ways, like Bill and Svetlana, and in ordinary ways. So what exactly could you do to help prevent a mass atrocity? For that, I need to introduce one final concept, that of an atrocity prevention lens. This is a term that was coined by Australian international relations expert Alex Bellamy, with the goal of ensuring that government officials would put every decision and action underneath a magnifying glass to examine its potential to contribute to atrocity prevention, or alternatively, to contribute to higher levels of risk of mass atrocity. What I would like to do is put that magnifying glass, your very own personal atrocity prevention lens, in your hands. What I'm calling for is a broad-reaching and creative approach to thinking about atrocity prevention, in which individuals would evaluate their day-to-day decisions, large and small, personal and professional, with an eye toward how they might contribute to atrocity prevention. So I ask you to think about your current life, your job, your family, your social circles, your faith community, your travels, your neighborhood, and let's think about ways in which you could contribute to atrocity prevention. For this, we need to assume that nothing we do is neutral. Everything has consequences. And our decisions and actions can either contribute to prevention, or they can contribute to the increased risk of atrocity. So in your professional life, depending on your job, atrocity prevention might take the form of considering the implications of decisions that you make about what companies or countries you will do business with, what messages you will allow to be forwarded on your communications platforms, what trends you will take notice of and act on, and how you will test and market new products or technology. And we can be prevention actors in our personal lives, in our roles as parents, neighbors, tourists, consumers, and citizens. We contribute to atrocity prevention when we teach our children to resolve conflict without resorting to violence. When we consider in our decisions about what to buy, where to travel, for whom to vote, and what we post on social media, the implications for atrocity prevention or atrocity risk. When we remind our fellow worshipers that compassion, love, and basic humanity are the fundamental tenets of every major religion. And when we take the time to reach out and genuinely get to know people with different cultural, religious, and political beliefs. It's not rocket science. It's atrocity prevention, and to do it well, we need a lot of individual prevention actors. So before wrapping up, I would like to address one last critique masquerading as a question that I and my colleagues at the Institute hear all of the time. That is, how will we ever know if what you or I have done has actually prevented an atrocity? Because prevention is ultimately about what doesn't happen, we run up against the age-old conundrum of how to prove a negative. And we can't. What we can show is that our actions contribute to intermediary conditions, which are associated with less risk and fewer occurrences of mass violence. So recall earlier that I mentioned models which evaluate risk based on various indicators. For every indicator of risk, there are counter-indicators of resilience. Our actions can effectively tip the scales in favor of resilience so that our community, our society, can experience some risk, be able to push back without advancing further toward genocide. In some respects, never again is such an overused phrase and an unfulfilled promise that it might be tempting to abandon it. But we can't. It has to remain the aspirational goal until it's realized. Accepting individual responsibility for prevention does not release the governments and international actors from their responsibilities. We can and should critique the failures of the United Nations and of individual governments, including the United States, and insist that they do better. And at the same time, we can and must, each and every one of us, do our part as individuals. So in summary, we need individuals, not just institutions, to be committed to atrocity prevention. We all have a role to play, regardless of our degrees and our jobs. We need atrocity prevention actors everywhere and now. And this doesn't have to involve massive disruptions of your life. Take your personal atrocity prevention lens and apply it to your decisions. Help us build resilience. I'm dedicated to doing my part, and I ask you to join me in this mission possible. Be one of the Binghamton University alumni, changing the world for the better. Be part of a growing cadre of individual atrocity prevention actors. Thank you.